Hello, I'm Dan Hounsel, editor of Facility Maintenance Decisions magazine. Thanks for joining us for today's webcast, Improvement Projects to Prepare for 2021. This event is interactive with a live Q&A session later, so I do encourage you to submit your questions. You can do that by using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to type in your questions. So let's start by introducing our panelists today. Heidi Shetler is Director of New Market Development with NewPig Corporation. For more than 28 years, Heidi has been the eyes and ears of NewPig, having visited hundreds of plants and facilities to help environmental health and safety professionals find solutions to their EHS issues. A walkway auditor certificate holder, Heidi has become an expert in identifying, developing, and implementing custom programs for new products in new markets. Patrick Cook is Senior Director for Eagle Eye Products. Patrick has more than 20 years of experience in the physical security industry. He has held strategic roles within national integration firms and manufacturing leaders, and he has managed major industry transitions of analog to IP, the proliferation of high-resolution cameras, and now the shift from on-premises to cloud-based systems. Scott Smith is Industry Principal for Facilities and Data Centers with Osisoft. Scott has spent almost 25 years supporting critical infrastructure sectors. Scott's areas of expertise has been working between IT and operational technology, starting with power generation, transmission, and distribution, and evolving to facility and data center operations. Here are today's learning objectives. Learn what cloud computing can do to help with data storage and computing power. Understand how to evaluate the seasonal weather common for your facility, and plan effectively for long-term data issues. Before we start with today's webcast, let's discuss 3 important points. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, a live question and answer session will follow the webcast. To submit your questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type in your questions. Our panelists will answer as many questions as time permits. At the conclusion of the webcast, you will receive a PDF copy of today's presentation slides. You also will receive a link to a brief online assessment. Once you successfully complete this assessment, you will receive your CEU certificate. And finally, today's webcast will be archived at facilitiesnet.com/webcasts. Now to the webcast. As the COVID-19 pandemic played out in institutional and commercial facilities nationwide, many facility managers rose to the challenge by making a host of changes and upgrades to facilities, all in an effort to stop the spread of the coronavirus and to help ensure the safe and healthy return of occupants, staff, and visitors. But the challenge for managers are far from over. In addition to addressing ongoing COVID-19 considerations, managers must ensure the long-term performance of a range of facility systems and components. And now is a good time to start thinking about longer-term strategic plans for facilities. Today's panelists will walk attendees through the process of identifying projects that managers and their departments can plan, perform, and complete in order to provide safer and healthier work environments for building occupants, staff, and visitors. Now let's bring in our panelists. To start our proceedings, I will turn it over to Patrick Cook with Eagle Eye Networks. Patrick?
Perfect, Dan. Thank you very much for that great introduction. Obviously very excited to be here and speaking with our audience today. For a little background, Eagle Eye Networks is a cloud-based video surveillance company. We were founded in 2012 by Dean Draco, who was the founder and former president of Barracuda Networks. Our headquarters is in Austin, Texas, with offices globally in Tokyo, Amsterdam, and Colombia. And we have 11 data centers worldwide with customers in over 80 countries. And Eagle Eye has been consistently rated the #1 provider in cloud video surveillance worldwide, as represented by these trusted reporting agencies you see on the slide here. So let's talk about cloud a little bit. When we speak about cloud-based systems or true cloud design, we're referring to on-demand computing resources existing solely off of your site. So in this example, most of you probably have a cable box to access television, or most likely a Netflix account to stream movies. The concept is that the movies and the cable television do not exist on that piece of hardware you currently have sitting in your house. Those units simply provide the gateway to access those services and merely act as buffers of information so that your experience is seamless. And that is the same concept with Eagle Eye. And now that we've addressed the architecture some, let's talk about some of the benefits here. So as you can see here, we've got a few bullets listed. Cost savings, no more buying and then life cycling servers. Security, protection of assets, employees, and customers. Remote maintenance, your support partners and Eagle Eye can access your system for health monitoring at any time. So no more scheduling windows of time to access local networks. Flexible retention. So you get to pick and choose what kind of video retention you would like on a per camera and per site basis. Is it 30 days? Is it 90 days? Is it others? And if those change due to unforeseen instances like a crazy little pandemic, then you can instantly change all those cameras to reflect the new conditions. Next, we have scalability. So Eagle Eye does not limit your growth physically or through insufficient software resources. Increased stability, general system updates, firmware upgrades, cybersecurity improvements, and new user features are constantly added to the system with zero requirements from your organization. Lastly, disaster recovery. Eagle Eye protects your data offsite in triple redundant data centers. So how does Eagle Eye accomplish all of this? Well, as the title states, not all clouds are the same. Most of the systems you see deployed today create hybrid solutions where data is stored locally with access and some features provided through the cloud. At Eagle Eye, we simply provide a box, what we call a bridge, to act as a buffer for sending the data from your local camera network up to the cloud for user access. This information can then be accessed through your desktop or laptop, and of course, through a mobile application. So why is this design preferable to other offerings? Well, of all things, COVID has actually provided us a great example to prove the position here. As you all know, our world is heavily disrupted by this pandemic. And what it exposed were a few things here with traditional on-premise systems. Poor remote performance, feature loss, or data restrictions when working remotely. And introduced cybersecurity concerns. So IT managers had to figure out how to open up their networks as safely as possible to provide access to systems for workers working remotely. So what to consider when choosing a system? There are quite a few things when choosing. Those that we've already listed, and obviously these that I wanted to make sure that we had on the slide, such as ease of use, alerting, and overall cost, which come into the factor. Eagle Eye addresses all of these considerations in a single robust system offering that you can grow and add to in a kind of an a la carte fashion, if you will. Taking all of this into account, here are some specific support cases for addressing security as an improvement project for 2021. So consistent occupancy rates, right? Tenant comfortability increases when they feel safer. Higher potential rent, so existing and potential tenants are willing to pay more when they see a value. And this is obviously adding to your increased revenue. Asset protection, protect the physical environment and assets, which reduces overhead and monthly OpEx. And Eagle Eye can facilitate this through the additional use of advanced analytics. We have line crossing, people counting, camera tampering, loitering, intrusion detection, all things relevant due to normal environments that we're working in tenant environments, but I think have really become prominent in the era of COVID as well, when we want to start to look at distancing and how many people are in a certain location and what kind of safety is actually being deployed by your staff in those environments. So just a lot of things that from an operational standpoint, you can get multi-purpose use out of your video, which again, traditionally has been there for simply security protection. So in closure, I just wanted to provide a wrap up of the overall offering from Eagle Eye. We offer a broad camera support. We have over 3,000 cameras that we innately support, including thermal, analog, HD over coax. We have advanced analytics. We have an open API, and that just simply means that we work with, we have an open architecture, and we work with a lot of third-party companies that are out there. And then lastly, we have secure. So it's fully encrypted data within our system. And as we know, cybersecurity continues to be a sensitive point when it comes to anyone's data. So we want to make sure that you have your comfortability there. And with that, Dan, I think we've wrapped up, and I will pass that back over to you, sir.
And thank you, Patrick. Next up is Heidi Shetler with New Pig Corporation. Heidi?
Thanks, Dan. I thought I'd start off the presentation with this nice little saying, because it's kind of what I'm going to be talking about today. And it deals with, there's always going to be weather. It's always going to come into your facility in some fashion. But today's presentation is about learning how to dance through all that water and being prepared and thinking through it before it actually happens. So I thought that would be kind of a really cool way to kick off the presentation. So a little bit about New Pig. Some of you might not be familiar with us, but we've been in existence about 35 years. Most of you, if you know anything about New Pig, we were the patent holder for the first absorbent sock, and you can kind of see that on your screen there. A lot of you would say, yeah, I use that to soak up water around an overflow, or I use that in my home, or I use that in cleaning up a spill. So that's who we are. We were the first company that developed that product. And also our mission is really, really clear. It's about cleaner, safer, better solutions dealing with liquid cleanup. So if we've asked our customers through the years why they purchased product from us, it was always either a regulatory reason, a cleaner reason, or a safer reason. So when you think of New Pig and you think of the product line or the solutions we can provide, those would be some words that you should kind of think about. Also, just to kind of give you a scope, millions of customers worldwide. So this company with the funny name of New Pig Corporation, we're in 40 plus countries, multiple channels. So a lot of times people don't realize the depth of our business model. So I try to always point that out because the name tends to cause people to giggle a little bit. Also, one of the other things that we always try to do is be what we call the duct tape. So for those 35 years being in all those facilities, something that I've done a lot of is looking for those solutions that maybe you've been cobbling together, and we turn around and we create products from that. So we utilize a lot of your problems in order to find maybe more eloquent solutions. And also when you do look at our product offering, what you might do is kind of get inspired or think that I could try that there or consider that option in another area of our facility. So that's a little bit about our company. The one thing I'm going to talk about today is basically being prepared. Water's going to come into your facility in some fashion, whether it's a roof leak, whether it's an intrusion because you have an older building, whether you have leaky seals, whether it's a process problem, or whether it literally comes in the front door. We all have these problems. What I'd like you to do in 2021 is get out ahead of them. Think about them before they happen, because if you prepare yourself, you can really mitigate the impact that event's going to cause on you and your facilities. So I always like to put in a few insurance statistics because that tends to get people to pay attention, because water is kind of one of those invisible hazards, as we would call them, really common. It's one of the biggest claims when it comes to insurance companies. It is a $11 billion market. Average cost is about $5,000. We find some that are higher than that, you know, if it's a catastrophic ceiling basically falls in, but we try to live in the land of averages, right? So we find that about 5,000 to 10,000 is about the going rate. And we also find that 93%, this is really important because a lot of people don't think about this. 93% of them can be avoided if we think through them beforehand. So my objective today is to kind of get you and your teams, right, to go back and maybe do a facility audit to think through how can we get out ahead so we don't see these large claims and we're not part of that $11 billion market. Something else I thought was really interesting was the weather. If we stay out ahead of the weather events that we know it's going to rain, and when it rains, I better have this, that, and the other thing on hand. I better have ways to sandbag if my facility has a low-lying area, because the weather accounts for about 8% of that damage. So that was, I thought, was a pretty cool statistic of something to consider. Also, water actually affects the cost from a couple of different ways, right? So we all know water's going to happen. We need to think about it in what I call 5 different areas. Budgeting. If I have to take time to clean it up, I need to find man hours. I need to stop what I'm doing in order to take care of a problem. I might have some downtime, which means I might have to shut something down. I might have to shut the water off because I have this type of water leak because my plumbing issue above my ceiling tile is another area to consider. Insurance claims, we all know we have them. We talked about them a couple of minutes ago. And cosmetic appearance. So water can be damaging. We all know places in our facility where they have that brown towel. Right? We know there's a water leak. We can never find it. It's always one of those challenging areas. Our roofs leak and they migrate all across all those pipes that are in between the drop ceiling and the roof to take a leak that might be on one end of the facility and move it all the way over to the other end of the facility. So sometimes right where you see that brown visual, let's call it indicator of a ceiling tile might not be where the root cause is. So again, cosmetic appearance. And I mentioned a little bit about the insurance claims. So some of the numbers can get up as high as 17,000 is a number that we often hear. Actually, I try to use the 10 to 12 as a good rule of thumb. So what I'm asking you to do is basically be prepared. So we all know seasonal weather or water events happen in our facility. I find it hard pressed for the folks on the call today to not be able to think about one, whether it's the sink overflowed in the break room, the water cooler sprung a leak, something in your boiler room, or it just came in from outside on an umbrella. Okay, so they're all happening, and how you respond and how you're prepared will really affect the outcome. So some things to be thinking about. Could I have predicted this water event, right? So could I have been watching the weather? Could I have known that that visual clue, because we see those visual clues where it's mold, softness, something within our facility. Do I have a plan in place to how to safely clean up and make repairs? So think through these problems and have a plan. Do I have the correct equipment? Everybody has a mop, everybody has paper towels, everybody has rags, they have a shop vac. But is that the right way to respond to some of those events? It could be, but I'm asking you to think through it. What have I done in the past? So going back and looking at, you know what, I've had that same area. Water comes in the back corner every time it rains. Am I cleaning it up the best way? Am I responding the safest way? Think through the past events and basically do a root cause analysis instead of just addressing the issue. Could I do it better next time? Again, that's all part of evaluating the situation and see if there's a better alternative. And something I always like to point out, because it tends to bite us in the backside sometimes, is how does my insurance policy read? And do I have exclusions on limits that pertain to water? Because if I do, I should know about those up front instead of after, because I might want to really rally my team around identifying those water events that maybe my insurance doesn't necessarily take into consideration and help us to manage those expenses. Now, This slide, I think, is a really good representation as how you can look at your facility and the key areas that we have found where water is a nuisance. So it's really simple. You got roof and ceiling leaks. It's pretty easy to find them. You probably all have had one of those somewhere within your facility. The one that we're really known for is the entrances and the water on the floor, right? And the biggest one, the biggest problematic one is all your doors. So are you covered at your doors? Water intrusion. It could be coming from a wall. It could be coming from a dock door. A lot of people forget about those dock doors because that's where there's a lot of foot traffic, a lot of safety issues occur there. And it rains. And when it rains, that rain and that wind comes in and can create an unsafe situation. So think about places where water can come in. Maybe you have a basement area where you have steps that can go down into your facility. What if I had a lot of rain? Could water come down those steps and basically get into my facility that way? Think through all the places that water can get in or water's problematic. Plumbing. You know, we all have plumbing issues. It's just part of the process. How am I going to respond when I do have that? So say I puncture, say I have a leak. How am I dealing with that type of problem? Because you probably already had them. Be prepared on how you respond to them, and it can basically affect the cost for your operation and making sure that you have the best solutions. Leaks and overflows. I often hear it's sinks, it's toilets, it's if you're a facility that has maybe a senior high rise or something like that, you can have overflows. It happens often. Condensation, that's really where your air conditioning units come in, right? So that area tends to want to leak and weep. So what can I do if it's in a walkway? So thinking through those things. So again, this is a great way to get your team together, get your maintenance team together in those 6 big hunks as to where water can be your biggest problem. Now, once you know those issues, something that we've prepared for our customers are basically how to think through them, right? So that you're prepared. And we break it up into 2 areas. One is weather related, right? That's really when it's raining, what's going to happen inside. And the other is operation. So you kind of put them into those 2 buckets. And then we turn around and we say, okay, now when I have those areas, when I have those problems, what are the variables that relate to that problem? So what's the type of problem at hand? What's the volume of water coming in? Where is it occurring? What's the frequency? Speed, duration, things like that. And then how am I going to respond? We break it up into a couple of different ways. You can absorb it, retain it, divert it, block it, clean it up, or stop it at its source. So identify and think through your problems under those 6 different ways of thinking. Then make sure your toolbox, as we call them, is stocked with solutions that address if I'm going to absorb, if I'm going to divert, maybe I need a leak diverter, if I'm going to contain, I'm going to block, I'm going to clean, I'm going to stop it at the source. So think through your problems as it relates to those 6 different ways of thinking. Then also, once that situation occurs, we always kind of wrap it up into 5 ways to evaluate how you respond, right? So determine your high risk areas, develop a plan, execute that plan. Basically make sure that if I have a roof leak, what am I going to do? If I have water coming in the front door, what am I going to do? And then prepare. Basically, what am I going to do? What's my contingencies if this incidents happen? And really, what does the ideas look like that I'm going to respond with? One of the things I want to make sure I leave you guys with, because it's the biggest one, that water gets into your facility and creates that safety risk, is at your doors, right? Your walkways. It's invisible. You can't see it until something happens. So make sure you inspect those high risk areas. I can't stress it enough, especially as we go into the wet season, the winter season. Entrances, walkways, steps, restrooms, break rooms, wherever there's fluid, it can get on the floor and it can create a problem for you. And then at the end, if you want, Something you can do, you can go visit our website. At the end of the webinar, if you would like to get our solutions guide dealing with water, let me know. And my contact information is right below, so you can reach out to me anytime. So with that, I'll pass it back to Dan for the next presenter.
All right, Heidi, thank you very much. And we will round out the presentation portion of our webcast with Scott Smith with Osisoft. Scott?
Thank you. And thank you everyone for participating today. And I do hope to provide really an effective commentary on how we can all plan for 2021. As mentioned, I am the industry principal for facilities and data centers for Osisoft. And really what I just want to say about my company is we've been kind of focused on data challenges for 40 years. And what I want to share today is how that will apply to us, all of us today, as we plan for our 2021 projects and how that is very critical. 2021 was very much consumed by COVID. And let's be honest, 2021 will be overshadowed by the lingering effects of COVID on the facility markets. And what I mean is much of our 2020 response was very visceral, right? And 2021 is going to need to be improved and fine-tuned. So even today, the science is not fully defined. And by that measure, neither is how we should respond in building operations. In 2020, we isolated people, we created cleaning strategies. We had some changing guidelines on how to clean our HVAC systems, provide filter improvements, or exchange more air. Really all immediate gut reactions based on sound principles. But 2021 really is going to be, how do we engage engineers? How do we collect data and make changes based on math and science? So projects I think are going to actually focus on how to, in lieu of spending billions of dollars in retrofitting buildings, how really do we leverage what we have available to make some sustainable changes to our operations to affect our business and our mission going forward? To give you some examples, we can of course implement what we all call continuous commissioning, fault detection on efficiency of air handlers, economizers, exhaust ventilations. We can evaluate differential pressures on the new filtration system so that we change our maintenance procedures. A lot of discussion on adding higher quality indoor air quality sensors and determine how we should do space utilization based on new occupancy demands. And of course, we can use that existing data to model outside air impacts on our building systems. And can we increase our free cooling to exchange more outside air? A lot of these things are all recommendations from ASHRAE and CDC, and how can we fit them to our building? Because every building is unique. As you can see on this slide, though, from our experience, buildings never really operate as designed. You know, we've kind of focused in prior years on driving energy efficiency. So how do we tune and change for everything from mechanical changes to design changes that occurred to optimize the performance of our buildings? I think what we're now going to see in 2020 was the focus on health and safety. And what that means for 2021 and beyond is, how do we maximize both? There will be an allowance because some of the changes increase our energy consumption. But how do we balance our energy costs and energy performance of buildings and reliability of assets with providing the maximum in health and safety to our occupants? Oops, a little too many slides there. Oops. All right, I'm still learning how to drive here. So again, every building is unique, right? No two organization has the same objective. A hospital is different than a Class A office space. A university is different from a government agency. The underlying systems, the underlying data, the underlying scope is relatively the same, but where we are, is the building a retrofit? Is the building a new construction? Do the occupants actually have to come back? Can they come back with a lower footprint of people per square footage? At the end of the day, the value that you need within your facilities is unique to you and your facilities. And one of the goals is going to be, how do we design our 2021 projects unique to each building within our portfolio and each problem that affects the mission of our organization, be it just providing floor space to providing healthcare to providing some type of services. Again, so that value is going to be absolutely unique to you and your buildings and your portfolio. So I think what we do as an organization and what's going to be unique is how do we leverage probably your most valuable asset? And your most valuable asset's going to be your people and your data. You don't have to spend more money on either one of those two. You just have to find a way to leverage those assets in a way to provide you new value. And facilities typically lag what I will call the industrial control world and how they use data. The industrial side has been trying for 20 years how to optimize how we brew beer, to how we run a power plant, to how we run the grid by using data for that optimization. Facilities, even to this day, let the data fall on the ground. They don't even have access to that data or don't even use that data. So the first thing is, how do we leverage that existing asset, that information and the existing knowledge of your employees and your resources to take that institutional knowledge and that data and create value? So I think the long-term challenge and where Osisoft fits in this mix is, if you think about all of those value statements of how you may want to change your business, is how do we separate data from the control system so that we provide a secure environment. We don't expose our institutions, our tenants, or our own to any additional risk or exposure. How do we actually make a low footprint? You know, we don't want to spend billions and millions on large projects and hope to have value. How do we take and have this exercise of using what we own to provide those step points of value? Like if I'm going to use my building management system to look at my CO2, you know, I can simply collect a little bit of data, and with a little bit of math, I can figure out what the optimal footprint is for my space utilization. Do I have too many people in this space? Do I see the CO2 rise too drastically based on the people coming and going? I can actually make health and safety decisions for my space utilization just by looking at the existing data that I have available. For us, at Osisoft, and the product we provide is called the Pi system, you know, it needs to fit your environment. Like I said up front, there are no two buildings alike. We serve every Navy base in the world with the Navy Smart Grid, and we can serve an individual building on a single campus or a small commercial building in a neighborhood in California. We have to adapt to what their requirements are to provide value. And we don't know where that value is coming from a project point of view. I was interviewing one of our customers just the other day on how they were responding to COVID with their campus facility. It's a university. And they monitor water for sustainability purposes. They also monitor energy. And in their water assessment, they noticed a lot of water consumption without students coming back. And really the first impact to COVID that they were experiencing was, if you don't use your plumbing fixtures, the first thing that's going to go are going to be your rubber seals. And lo and behold, they had to do a lot of plumbing retrofits on replacing seals and gaskets to prevent that loss of water, because there wasn't the continued operations. Same thing exists for HVAC systems and other systems in our building, but we just don't know where that's going to come from. We don't know where that challenge is going to come from. And that data really helps them get in front of that. And so I think as we think about 2021, we really need to think not just some of the immediate things for a COVID response, but from a long-term point of view. And I kind of point this out. A lot of my customers will use data for meter data, for billing their tenants, or dispersing the funds across multiple sub-organizations, right? So we look at meter data. I said, well, that's great. You know, with one additional mathematical problem, you can turn a metering system into an outage management system. So it's no additional data. So if I look from a long-term point of view, data builds upon itself. If I want to do fault detection, well, that builds upon some of the same data that I'm taking out of building automation for my metering project. So why do I keep buying additional platforms or products? So I think when we think about 2021, we need to think about 2022, 2023, and 2024 and really make strategic directions and decisions, right? We focus so much on a singular problem this year, and that is COVID. And we are going to drastically think about that problem again next year, but we have to bring it into fold of all of the other problems that we face, right? Our job at the end of the day is providing available space that's reliable, meets the comfort or the climate or environmental conditions for the tenant or the occupant of the space. We've always needed to drive that efficiency and that sustainability into our product as there's continuing and increased regulations around that. But we now need to actually pivot in providing a health and safety environment using that same data. So I think as we look at our 2021 projects, we really need to evaluate how we can leverage those assets we have of our employees, those resources and the data that we have to not go buy new things, but how do we improve and monitor and maximize the use of the assets that we have available to us today. So if you have questions, if you want to understand how data can drive your priorities or how a lot of our customers do it, again, my contact information slide, feel free. I'll be glad to talk about how data can drive some of your project priorities, irregardless if you like or dislike our product. So feel free to reach out and talk about how data can drive your projects. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time, Dan.
All right, thanks to Scott and Heidi and Patrick for your presentations and the great information and insights. And now let's move to the Q&A portion of our presentation today. And just a reminder to attendees to submit your questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Don't use the chat button, use the Q&A button and panel and type in your questions there. So let's start with, Scott, I'll start with a question to you, but I'll open it up to Patrick and Heidi as well. But in terms of the uncertainty that we're all facing in facilities, how would you suggest attendees plan 21 projects when still so much is unknown about COVID-19 and its ramifications in the economy, frankly? And then the other part of that question is, what would you suggest the role of the manufacturer is in sort of helping attendees move through this planning process? Scott?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. Actually, one of the fundamental beliefs I have is that we do not appreciate the facility engineers that we have available. And I think today with COVID that our facility operations teams really need a seat at the boardroom table. And that when we look at the corporate objective, the mission, if I'm a hospital, if whatever my business could be software development like it is, right? And do I need people in the office to take tech support calls or develop code? But that has to go in concert of how our facilities work. So I think one, we need a seat at the table to understand, to make sure we make decisions in alignment with not just health and safety and how facilities operate, but the core objective of our business. And we need to give honest feedback to make sure that we're making the smartest decisions available. And sometimes the data can help with that, some of it. And I think we need to really be honest, turn back to the engineering. Buildings are very integrated. They're like the human body, airflows, temperatures, pressures, and we need to not dismiss that, the technical aspect in making some of the decisions that we've actually made. And so that's where I would typically start.
Heidi, I'll turn it over to you for this one. Again, with so much unknown, how would you suggest that attendees undertake the planning process, and what role can manufacturers play in helping them?
So I'll take the perspective of the health and safety side. So when you have people that are working from home, you really don't have a building that you really have to manage except to keep it running. So I'm going to take this perspective of when you do have people working within your facility, you need to still think through the health and safety issues that COVID brings in. So for example, spacing people out. One of the biggest challenges that we saw was a lot of these buildings that had elevators were turning around and not wanting to use an elevator anymore to be able to spread the visitors, to be able to spread the workers out. So they turned around and started using the back steps. That changed the traffic pattern. That changed where I never really worried about the back hallway, for example. I had to start worrying about the back hallway. And that means that cup of coffee, that liquid that you carry in the morning, now was starting to turn into a different problem. So we turned around and, from a manufacturing perspective, which we are, is focusing on the safety side of how COVID changes our directional traffic flow, changes how we orient ourselves in a room, how we have to maybe reassess that room from example of, I can only have 6 people in this room anymore. I can't use that room anymore for our big meetings. So basically thinking through what's taking place within your facility, think through the people coming and going in because they're going to be going in it about a different way. We worked with a lot of schools, for example, if there's anyone on here today, where they just started limiting the backdoor entrance and they started rerouting people coming in one door, going out another door, so that if you do have, say, a case, somebody comes down with COVID or is asymptomatic, you can do the tracing that you need. So you've got to think through how people are coming and going and how that traffic pattern is changing within your facilities.
And Patrick, anything that you would offer in terms of the planning in such an uncertain time and the role that manufacturers can play in that process?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of carries forward the idea that I planted earlier, and that is, video has traditionally been a tool for security and perimeter protection or environment protection, but we really are seeing that shift to a more operational tool, and that means real-time access. That means real-time activity associated to that data information. And so how do we provide that access and how quickly it can be moved to those entities that need to have it, I think is a big shift. And understanding that in these building environments is critical. Where the role of the manufacturer comes in is making sure that we stay on top of what those new pain points and new responsibilities associated to those environments, and how can we address it with either a service or functionality within the system. And as an example, our system actually has a first responder functionality to it, so that the building owners can actually provide quick and easy access to real-time video and information regarding whatever the risk may be at that time. So I think that's a big piece of it from the manufacturer standpoint.
All right. And Patrick, I'll stick with you. A lot of our attendees, I'm sure, are dealing with a number of different facilities within their portfolio. How familiar is Eagle Eye in dealing with a multi-location rollout?
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, it's in our DNA, and it's exactly why Eagle Eye was actually created. As I mentioned earlier, Dean Draco is our founder, and he had a bunch of offices globally in his days at Barracuda Networks, and he wanted to basically see all of his employees working, but he could not find a single system that he could deploy across all sites that was easy to install and easy to set up and use. And so he created Eagle Eye. And here we are, our own company now. So, with that, on a multi-site rollout, it's as simple as literally dropping in a bridge or a gateway server into each of the buildings or the sites that you're working with. We can go into existing network. It immediately phones, and connects to our cloud, so that we make that encrypted handshake, and then you can program and adjust your system remotely on kind of the time that you need. So you don't have to have deployed resources or your typical high dollar, per hour smarts and parts people installing this type of equipment. It really is set up for, I think, the layman type of user, if that is the application. And behind all of that, we support that with design engineers. We can stage equipment. We have global installer base, and we can provide professional services as well if we need to take on additional commissioning of systems or whatnot. So there's a lot of tools at your access, and we're excited to be able to bring that to our partners.
All right. Heidi, a question for you here. In terms of roof leaks, obviously it's a common problem, and you addressed it a little bit in your remarks. But what would you suggest that attendees have on hand to start with in the case of a roof leak?
That probably the thing that we see the most, Dan, is what we call a leak diverter. And in our days, a lot of people refer to it as a tarp and a hose, right? Some duct tape, a couple of bungee cords, and out pops a tarp that goes into the ceiling and tries to channel the water away or collect it in a certain area. So the easiest thing is to identify with those roof leaks, is most of my problem a pipe, or is it literally water coming from somewhere else, kind of channeling down onto a tile area? So a leak diverter is about $150, really easy way to have something in your toolbox that you can hang up very quickly to just keep it controlled. So to me, great product, really easy to store. I'd go with a different type of leak diverter depending on the type of business. If I need to protect something, some people have like a computer room, for example, where all their hardware is kept, and it just happens to be an area where I can't get anything wet. You better protect it. So go check out our website. So many, I think we have about 50 to 60 different versions of that product. So leak diverter would be what I would suggest would be something you need to keep on hand.
All right. Scott, a question for you, and it's kind of a priorities question. There's a whole lot going on related to COVID-19 in facilities, and managers, attendees already had full plates. In terms of your company's technologies and solutions, any suggestions on how they prioritize where to start the process?
Well, I'm going to start with, I think you have to, this is where facilities again has to have that seat at the table, right? We need to make decisions on how we meet the objectives of our company. And I'm no different, right? When I look at our facility, we did what a lot of companies did, right? We created an open floor plan, really low cubicle walls. We have all of our supply air out at the sides of the building and all of our return airs in the main ducts in the center of the building, which means every person that breathes from the window exhales on every person between you and the wall. So you really have to then, okay, so what do we need mission to our business? So for me as a software company, I need to think in context as a facility person. What does my business need from a people point of view, and to do that? Second, I need to reassure. One of the things that I think challenges us in general today is knowing the facts. What is the real answer of what's going on? And making sure that we give the information that our employees demand of us, that we're providing safe environments, and not just take our word for it, right? I know before COVID, I did everything from looking at CO2 counts, so really trying to figure out indoor air quality. And I knew when a conference room that was effectively built for 6 people had 12 people in it, the CO2 could skyrocket 300% in less than 20 minutes. Still safe, still meeting all the ASHRAE requirements, but the challenge was, if my airflow decreases that, or my CO2 decreases that much, that means my air exchange rate is so bad that I know I should, as Heidi mentioned, I should limit the number of people in that space, because I have data and I have history. So I can now reassure my employees and give them confidence that their environments are safe and that they're willing to come back to work, and I want them back. That's where I would start. The other pieces are, I still need to maintain, I'm working with a high school system or public school system. The cost to start their HVAC system, just to pre-circulate the air per ASHRAE requirements, will cost them $800,000 for a public school system. Just to run their units an additional several hours every day to do an air exchange right before students come to school. If that's going to be the requirement and that's the safety, that's fine, that's health and safety. But can myself as a public school system absorb another $800,000 in energy costs? And if I run those additional hours, my maintenance costs are actually going to go up another factor because my runtime hours are going to exceed. So I need to start looking at some of the other underlying data, how I'm going to actually solve both problems at the same time of managing those costs as well and maintain reliability and safety. So I think you need to step back to what that immediate gut reaction is. We need to exchange air to what the larger impact is on my business, on my assets as well.
All right. Heidi, a follow-up question from an attendee. You mentioned leak diverters, and I will just read his comments here. Condensation is by far my worst enemy. I can move as much air as possible, but then I am just moving the problem someplace else. I use leak diverters, but the USDA and FDA do not like seeing these in warehouses. I keep adding fans, but the issue continues. Anything that you would suggest, offer any insights for this attendee?
Couple of things to think about here. A pitcher would really help me, and here's why a pitcher helps. If I can contain it. So basically water evaporates, right? So that's the nice thing about water is if I can hold it in, say, an absorbent mat or what we call an SAP pad that locks that water in, at some point it will dry out and it can continually work for you. So I have a number of people that if the problem is above the ceiling tile, they'll just put a piece of material up there, mildew resistant type of matting material that the water will absorb in, it won't break through the tile, and then it keeps drying over time. If I have condensation on the floor, so I have a couple of air conditioning units, for example, we have very narrow strips, very, very thin, almost as thin as paper, and we lay those right beside where that condensate can start leaking out so it doesn't get in the walkway, and it swells. When it starts to swell, it tells you that, hey, you know what? It's time for me to exchange it out or get rid of it, or it dries naturally depending on which product. So you might want to not put that diverter up, but wherever the liquid is, can I collect it, contain it, and let it dry out? As part of my maintenance plan. So sometimes the absorbent piece works, or we have things called diverters or blockers. If I can surround it and let it dry out and control it, and it's just water, right? But it's in a safe spot and you can visually see it. So it's not that eyesore. So you have my contact information. If you want to quickly snap a picture, I can drop some product solutions in to better actually understand your condensate issue if you'd like. But those would be two other options that you can go with.
All right, very good. Patrick, a question for you on the issue of third-party cameras. The question is, does Eagle Eye integrate with third-party cameras? And if so, where can attendees find out if their particular cameras are compatible?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good question, a very common one. First of all, we do have our own Eagle Eye branded cameras that are specifically set up to really plug and play into our obviously the VMS and the camera manager offerings that we have. On our website, however, you can find the full list of compatible third-party cameras that we currently have identified. The uniqueness and the ability of our system, however, is that if you do have a camera that's not identified on that list, as long as you plug it into the bridge, we actually have a button on that bridge that sends it directly to camera support. And usually within 2 to 10 days, we can develop a support integration or driver for that particular camera so that you can bring that functionality into our system there. So I think we can provide a lot of different options for existing systems as they tend to migrate to and scale their IP-based camera systems.
All right, Patrick, I will stick with you. This is a question for all three of you, though. In terms of a potential customer coming to you looking for solutions, The information is going to be a little different for each of you, I think, but what information should they bring with them? In other words, you're going to need to gather information about their situation. Just if you could just sort of provide a thumbnail about what you need to know to start this process, what you need to know about their facility. And Patrick, start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what we tend to see are generically the perimeter protection data all tends to be the same. It might be you know, a car, a vehicle, a person, types of threat. We just want to look at approach there, and then of course if a risk is identified, a hit and run or graffiti or a theft, you know, all of that is pretty standard. Typically, it's the internal environment where we'd like to have a deeper understanding of what those pain points are. What are you really trying to accomplish? And then we can actually create that best path forward with the solution and the types of hardware that are specified at that time. And, you know, I'm generally, I guess, amazed and sometimes shocked that, you know, we understand a pain point, but really helping the client identify the process associated to, once you have this information identified, what are you going to do with it? And so, you know, from the consultative side of our company, that's really where we try to step up and also provide some value, is the execution side of, once you have this information in hand, what do you do with it? And that speaks to a lot of different things, from HR to legal to any number of things. And so really, the more that we can have some thoughts and some ideas and some clarity behind that, I think the quicker we can put together a solid solution for those partners.
All right. Scott, in terms of Osisoft, what kinds of quote unquote basic information would you be looking for to start the process with a customer?
Sure. I mean, we really need to understand the problem. What are you trying to solve for? What keeps you up at night? If we can understand the problem, then we'll start understanding what we need underneath that. But typically it's going to be, what are your automation systems? What are your building automation systems? If it's like, I work with a pharmaceutical and they may be doing refrigeration monitoring in their facility, then I need to know what the system is for refrigeration monitoring. If it's, so whatever the problem and whatever the underlying data systems are that we can use for that problem solving analysis is typically where we'll start with.
Okay. And Heidi, in terms of NewPig, what kind of information are you looking for them to bring to ensure that there's an effective solution?
We're a little less complex than my panel buddies here, Patrick and Scott. We're just looking for your problem, and I think Patrick mentioned that as well. I'm really big on photos. Photos give me so many clues as to what's going on around you. So I'm looking for your challenging areas. Tell me where you had your insurance claims, right? Where did you have your last claim? Where is your most challenging water problem or liquid problem? And then we start our series of questions to try to understand how you want to solve it, right? What tools you already have on hand. So it's really simple as, I think one of our attendees asked the question, I've got condensate, and this is what my condensate problem looks like. Then I go into my toolbox and I will turn around and give you ideas of, you can do this, 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 and this, and you run that past your team. And between those dialogue back and forth and understanding questions and answers, then we kind of get to a couple of solutions. And then it's really up to you what value add makes most sense for your organization. So I'm always starting with the problem or the challenge.
All right, very good. We have just a few minutes left here, but one final question. Anything in terms of COVID-19 specific challenges or anything, I guess, what sorts of opportunities are you seeing, or challenges are you seeing within facilities that are specifically related to COVID-19? I know it's affecting almost every system and component in facilities. So it's a question for anyone in terms of a COVID-19 challenge or opportunity that you're seeing.
Yeah. So I've got a very easy one, and that's the proliferation of thermal cameras. We've typically deployed those in different types of situations pre-COVID. And now it seems like you could make the case for almost any public gathering place or multi-use type of environment, buildings where you have commercial, business, retail and living all in one environment. And then how do you identify that person and show the connectivity? And, the best way right now is with video to kind of look at that and be able to provide those alerts and notifications in a very transparent way, and consistent way. So thermal cameras would be the biggest piece for us in this COVID environment.
I'll comment. One of the questions was around UV lights and the other one's indoor air quality. So we do see people starting to ask about adding true indoor air quality sensors, so reset standards of particulate, volatile organic compounds, particulate matter to understand quality of air. But the UV is a great example. You could go install all the UV system lights in your air handlers you want. What's an air handler? It's a metal box that you can't see into. So how do you actually know that your UV systems are working? How do you know when you change from a MERV 7 or MERV 8 to a MERV 13 filter that you're not blowing out your filters because your maintenance processes don't adjust to adding new assets or changes? So I think the filtration and understanding how the filters impact maintenance. How do you maintain and monitor UV lights, which you can't see anymore, and to make sure that they're still providing that health and quantity? And then indoor air qualities are the three things that we see right now.
I'll kind of take it from a little more, a different approach is cleaning, right? So the way we have to clean our facilities, or the hypersensitivity to cleaning, has been something that has challenged our workforce, and more importantly challenged our supply source, right? So there's many people now that can't locate, even personally pre-moistened wipes or wiping cloths, or do I want a microfiber? Do I want a dry wipe? Do I want a saturate wipe? What is going to be my operations around cleaning? So just kind of taking that step back and looking at that, because as employees come in, they're asking those questions. They're asking what is my cleaning protocol? What is my tracking protocol? And then even the communication piece of internal COVID practices. So am I going to limit my number of people in a conference room? Am I going to restrict use around a table in the cafeteria? Am I going to put wipes and cleaning material nearby for those heavy touch points like the microwave handle, right? Do I have things available for my employees to clean off those surfaces? So you know what, it's really stepping back and looking at the cleaning piece. Do I need to contract out if I do have a positive case? Am I going to use a fogger? Do I like the fogger system? Just things along those lines. So just focusing on the cleaning to make sure your employees, your customers are comfortable, and your visitors even coming in, that you screen them before they come through your door.
All right, very good. Just a couple of reminders to attendees. You will receive a PDF copy of today's presentation slides. You also will receive a link to a brief online assessment. Once you complete the assessment successfully, you'll receive your CEU certificate. And today's webcast also will be archived at facilitiesnet.com/webcasts. So with that, I'll thank our panelists for their presentations and their insights and information. Thanks also for the attendees for spending time with us today. I'm Dan Hounsell, editor of Facility Maintenance Decisions magazine, and this concludes our webcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thanks.